Welcome to the Sam and Joe VA Show, where we teach women just like you how to start and scale a thriving virtual assistant business.
We're your hosts, Sam and Joe, and get ready to have the control, flexibility, and freedom you've always dreamed of.
Welcome to episode 183, Finding Your Brand Voice as a Virtual Assistant.
Joining us on the podcast today is communications consultant and brand designer Courtney Haines. Courtney teaches businesses how to develop healthy and dynamic personal brands, and today is going to chat with us about finding your unique brand voice. Welcome, Courtney. We're so happy that you're here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
We've been trying to get you on for ages, but you took a trip to bloody Vietnam, I think. What was that about?
I wanted to eat Vietnamese food for weeks, so I did.
Isn't it literally the best food you've ever eaten?
Honestly, it was the whole trip was actually amazing. It was such a cool break from, Western civilization.
We have the whole time off work. Like, what was the reason?
I don't do that. It's controversial, but I do think that everyone needs to find, if you work for yourself and you're the only one, then you have to find your way to switch off. And my particular way to switch off is to check my emails once a day and then and just kind of allocate them to, I tell my clients, I say, if the house is burning down, put it in the title. If not, I'm just going to read it and then I'm going to put it aside so I know what I'm coming back into. So there's no I'm not coming back to emergencies, but I also kind of keep tabs on what's going on. I used to not check my emails at all, and I would come back to mad anxiety and it would be bothering me the whole time I was away. So I don't not work, but I do switch off.
That's great. I never thought of it that way, because for me, the worst bit about going away on holiday is that first day back and you open your email. And as you said, the anxiety, because you see the hundreds of messages that you then have to go through all in one go. Like, that does my head in.
Yeah.
Better to know than not know, right? Wow,
Yeah,
I have not thought about this before. That's so fascinating.
It's not for everyone. And I think it took several different trips to work out what worked for me. But I just kind of, if I didn't check my emails, I would get this kind of dread that would build throughout the course of the holiday. And it would really I would be distracted from being present in moments because, we often catastrophize what's going on. So if I kind of stay abreast of what's going on and I can see what I'm moving into, but I'm not actually doing anything about it, and the expectations are set that I'm not going to respond to things unless it's an emergency, then I find it really puts my mind at ease. But to each their own is, I think, the message that I try and tell people. Yeah. If you have to switch off completely, then do that. It just doesn't work for me personally.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong in this, is there? There's no right or wrong in life in general.
In life and business.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to murder people. That's about it.
Yeah.
Okay, there is right and wrong. We're not saying there's no right or wrong. We take it back.
I love how you very clearly talked about your expectations with your clients and those that you're working with. And I guess for someone that's a communications expert, we should expect that of you, right? If there's anything that you're going to do is communicate really, really well.
I mean, I hope so. Sometimes I feel like my communication suffers because I'm like working on my client's communication so hard. But in general, I don't think communication means having to say a lot of things. I think communication means thinking about what's the appropriate thing to say it at the right time, in the right way, with the right amount of quantity. I think sometimes people think about communication in volume, but it's not actually about how much you say. It's about saying the right thing at the right time. So I try. Yeah, I'm sure I don't get it right. I talk to my client.
How did you get into the communications and personal branding gig? Like, how did this come about?
Yes. Okay. So I have an unconventional business journey. I started working for myself almost a decade ago, but it wasn't in communications and branding. I started working in social media, and it was by accident. I was trying to write a book. I had just finished working in the wedding industry, and I wanted to write a book that was like a little bit of an expose on behind the scenes of the wedding industry, because I knew all these people who worked in it. So I wanted to tell the story of like what's happening while you're getting married, which is chaos. And so I was going around, and most of the people that I was interviewing were service providers, so florists and venue owners and SMEs. And I knew how to set up social media business accounts and like put together little plans on how to do it because I'd done it for a previous business. And so I would trade them. I said, hey, because they were all very hesitant. This was back in the day when people were like, ooh, is Facebook going to like take my personal information if I start a business page? I would say, hey, I will set up your business page and I'll give you a bit of a plan if you give me an interview. Mm-hmm. And one or two of them were just so thrilled with the work that I did for them that unbeknownst to me, they just shared this with like their hairdresser and someone else, their real estate agent. And so I would get phone calls from people who did not know me going, are you a social media girl? And in a pure moment of madness, I was like, yes. And then they would be like, cool, I need you to do this setup for us. And can you please invoice us? And so I just panicked for about 6 months and found myself with a business.
You started panic invoicing.
I should do that again. I did. So that's how I started, as I started just helping people. And for me, social media was a lot simpler back then. But my focus was actually around how to help people improve their confidence, communicating what was important to them in their business. And social media was just a new format to do that. So it was a lot more about actually talking to them about their fears and how they wanted to represent themselves. So even back then, I think that was where my head was at. But yeah, I did social media for a while. I worked for a startup for a while, and they brought me in for social media, but it was a startup. So they were like, you write things, don't you? Can you just like write our website and our investment pitches and, all this really important stuff? So I wrote it, and then I started copywriting. And then from copywriting, I realized very quickly working with SMEs that I could articulate their brands better than they could. And to me, that was unfair, because if I could write something, but they couldn't, then whenever they needed to voice something new, they had to come back and pay me. And that wasn't sustainable. But I also felt like it was very disempowering for them. So I started running workshops on how to be able to craft your brand story and your brand language and all these core pieces of communication, because I think that they had a right to own that and to be able to deploy it themselves if they needed to, or hand it on to whoever they needed to do it, because I'm not going to write a letter for them. It's not very sustainable. So I really wanted to give ownership back to people on their brand and their communication and their language. And that's how we ended up here.
So you have become, I'm seeing a theme here, where you've become the thing that people really need next in their business journey. And that whole, I love that you have realized that people actually need to learn how to do this stuff. Because like you say, they can't just write every single, get you to write every single thing or outsource every single thing in their business. And I love that we're talking about this brand voice topic today, because we know that virtual assistants, they don't know how to have a brand voice. They don't know whether they should be professional. They don't know whether, they often come from a corporate background and they're like, oh, we are so professional in our corporate background. So I'm going to, obviously, does that make sense that I would do exactly the same thing in my small business that I'm starting and be professional? Because business is about being professional, is what we all are taught back in our corporate roles. So love that we have you here today to talk about this, because we need to unravel this for the virtual assistants who are listening.
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
keen.
I think there'll be a lot of virtual assistants listening that haven't even heard of the term brand voice. So Courtney, could you start us off by, I don't know, brand voice 101? What is it? Why is it important?
Cool. Well, I suppose let's roll it back even further and say, well, what is a brand? Because a brand voice is a piece of a brand. So a brand, I like to explain it like the brand is the house that you build, that everyone looks at when they're about to walk into your business. The marketing is what brings people to the house. So marketing is about telling people, oh, we've got this amazing house and look at this cool house. But when people come to the house, their choice to step through the threshold of that house or not, that's your brand. So the brand is the house, it's the structure, it's the constant, it's the personality, it's the tone. So if you think about your brand, and branding and marketing, they work in the same space, but they do very different things. So if you look at a house and you go, wow, it's a beautiful house. I feel like I'd be safe there. I feel like I'd have fun there. I feel like there's cool people that exist inside this house. That's your brand. So it's a little bit more of an ambiguous type of thing, because people think of marketing like how many eyes can we get and how many conversions can we get. That's what marketing is like, how do you tell your story? The brand is the story that you tell. So when it comes to brand voice, it's the personality that you bring through. So it's the colors on the wall. It's the, the shade, the tone, the style. And it's very specific to you, because all brands are personalities. Here's how I think about brands. When I see a brand and it's maybe just like they've got a logo and maybe they've got like a couple of colors that they use all the time, they've got pretty standard kind of corporate voicing. To me, it looks like the old-fashioned Mickey Mouse, like, the one that was just like a kind of a sketch drawing, and it can look like happy or sad or scared, but like you don't really care that much. You can't get emotionally involved in that Mickey Mouse. And then when I see a brand and it's really beautifully put together and its voice is laid out really intentionally and, everything works together nicely, it's like a Pixar animated character. So even though it's simple, you can really feel something, and you can get how many people cried in Finding Nemo. So that's what a brand is to me. It's like a character, it's a personality. So your brand voice is the way that you vocalize that personality. And it can be as varied and as different as people are and businesses are. But yeah, a brand voice is the vocalization of the personality of your brand.
It's so important. It's what makes you stand out from the crowd. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that, well, the world is very noisy at the moment. And so not leveraging your unique brand personality is a mistake, just because people are going to go right past it. And it's an asset that you have. You are unique as a person. Your brand is unique as a person. You need to decide whether you're leveraging yourself or you're leveraging an impersonal brand, but either way, it's unique. And making that personality shine is really how you send out the call to other people who resonate with that personality. If you think about when you meet people, you resonate with them. You're like, yeah, they're really cool. They look like they're fun, or they look like they're really smart, or they're really mysterious. It's the personality that you're judging it by. And you're connecting with that person based on your values and your personality and how well you feel like you mesh. A brand personality and a brand's voice is the same thing. We read it and we see it and we either go, it's not for me, or we go, it kind of looks like everybody else, or we go, oh my God, that something that feels like they see me and they understand me. And that's the power of brand voice and brand personality, is you let your audience recognize you in them.
Do you think that some business owners, freelancers, whatever, those that have tried to have a brand voice, but maybe haven't really gone all in, like they're fearful of that repelling, they're fearful of showing up authentically, and then that's going to actually put people off. Well, if I show everybody all my quirks, what if they then don't want to hire me? Do you think that's a common fear around a brand voice?
I think so. I think that that's a common fear around personal brands. And some people don't want to own the fact that they're a personal brand. So I should clarify, regardless of what you name your business, if the value of your brand lies within your personality. So if you extract your personality from the business and it's damaged and people feel like they don't trust it or it's not interesting anymore, then you have a personal brand, regardless of whether you call yourself a name or you call yourself your name, doesn't matter. You have a personal brand. So acknowledging that and leveraging that or changing that is a really important step along the journey. So a lot of virtual assistants, I imagine, have personal brands because they're leveraging their personality. People are choosing to work with them, not just because of what they can do, because lots of people can probably do something similar. They're choosing to work with them because they resonate with their personality. So yes, I think that spotlight struggle of what are people going to say, what are people going to think, that is genuinely something that holds a lot of people back from just owning the fact that they have a personal brand and leveraging that personality to attract the right people. Because there will always be people who don't agree with you or like the style or the tone. That's inevitable. And I think that just accepting that is the first step, but also acknowledging that when you are using a personal brand, it's not the entirety of you. One of the reasons why I work in personal brand space so passionately at the moment is because I know more and more people are going to be using them, and I want people to be using them safely. And if you are putting all of you, the entirety of you, into your personal brand, then you're opening yourself up to be talked about as a product, because that's what a brand is. It's a thing. And productizing your entire self doesn't sound very healthy or very safe. So making sure that you understand what goes in and what stays out of your personal brand is the first step to feeling safe and okay with putting pieces of yourself out there. So yes, I agree with authenticity, but I also believe that you can have curated authenticity, which doesn't mean that your entire self is just out there for debate and for, weird feedback and, random people that want to have opinions. I don't think that that's healthy or it's right.
We read something that you wrote recently and it really hit home. It was around that. I think you were talking about these, you've got different versions of you. So putting yourself out there and being authentically you doesn't necessarily, like as you said, showing everything, because you have different versions of you. You've got the parent you, you've got the daughter or the sister or brother you. Then you've got the slightly more kind of professional version of you where you might be changing your tone slightly. I mean, for Joe and I, we're very proud of the fact we believe we show up authentically, but we definitely have on Sam and Joe as opposed to Sam and Joe that sit in a Zoom for hours on end working together. You know what I mean? It is slightly different. It's still us, but it is a slightly different version of us. And that's okay. It's still authentic.
Absolutely. I think that there was a bit of damage done early on when a lot of people who were influencers or personal brands, they appeared very fake, and because they were being very fake. And so there was this big pendulum swing back to radical authenticity and transparency, which we needed. But it resulted in the advice, which I don't really agree with, when people say, oh, you just have to show up as yourself. Just be yourself and it'll be fine. And everyone will love that. I don't think just being yourself as a product is very safe or healthy, because sometimes myself is incredibly vulnerable, is incredibly not able to deal with things. So I need to be myself as is appropriate in the moment. And that's what I was explaining in that post was you are the appropriate version of you in the moment all the time. And that changes really drastically. So when you're showing up in your personal brand, be the you that's ready for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not inauthentic. It's just understanding what's right for the moment and what's safe and healthy for you.
Yeah. About protecting our energy, I guess.
Absolutely. Nowhere do we say that it's all good to just turn an entire person into a sellable product. That sounds very unethical. And yet a brand is a sellable product. And we all know that, and no one has an issue with that when it comes to business. So when we're talking about turning a piece of a person into a sellable brand, then you need to understand where that piece starts and where that piece stops, because you as an entire person are not up for debate. You are a complex, nuanced human being who is constantly going through changes and, feels differently from day to day. And you should be allowed to be that while still creating consistency within your brand. So that process of separating things really does give people a lot of confidence, because they don't feel like their entire selves is up for debate or up for consideration or up for sale.
Feels heavy. Feel heavy. I think we've got caught up in that sometimes, Joe. I mean, pretty good, but there's been times where it's just like, oh, I'm exhausted and it all just feels really heavy.
Let's have a chat about those who are listening that are unsure about what version of themselves should they actually have out there that's going to resonate and attract their ideal client? Because I think there's like this hard, even for me, like figuring out like, if I'm a virtual assistant who is wanting to attract tradies, say, or if I'm a virtual assistant who's wanting to attract like online entrepreneurs or online coaches, am I actually deciding on which version of me and which personal brand and which brand voice I'm actually showing that's going to be authentically me, or the version that's resonating with my ideal client, the tradies? Like, am I using my like tradie version of my personality and that's how I'm showing up and like deliberately choosing that? Or am I still just going to be my authentic self? And is that going to like kind of marry up with my ideal client? What's your take on that?
Yeah. So that's a really interesting question. And this is where this word authenticity really kind of trips people up, because they feel like if they're only being a piece of themselves, it's not authentic, which I disagree with. But to answer your question, it's the cross section. So there are aspects of your personality, hopefully, that will resonate with the people that you're trying to attract. And there are aspects of your personality that will not. But what they're looking for, and then the aspects of your we need to meet in the middle. So we've got your ideal client and what they're looking for and what they want to hear. And then this collection of your personality that aligns with that. So the cross section of what you're going to put out, that piece in the middle. Yeah, does that make sense? So there'll be a collection of you that resonates with them. Finding out what that particular makeup is, what that particular little cluster is a process that people have to go on, and you probably have to do some research and have some good conversations. A lot of times your clients will tell you to your face what it is that really attracted them to you. They'll say it. They're not going to say it in like, oh my God, I really love this, but they'll be like, oh, thank God you do this. Or they'll be like, you know what? Yeah, I really needed someone who would sort that out for me. So a process of listening to what they find valuable, not only in your services, but in the way you go about it, is really an indication of what they like about your personality.
Well, a great way to figure that out or ask that question directly is in a discovery call, actually asking and saying, why me? Why did you choose? Why did you get in touch? Because that can give you some really good indications about what has been attractive about you in your offering. Awesome. All right. Let's have a chat about how does someone who's come from corporate and has learnt, like I was saying before, they've learnt that like being professional is the way that they need to show up and resonate. And like, what's your take on like professional version of you that you've come from corporate and you are bringing that into your own business?
I would say that, again, it comes back to who it is that you're trying to attract into your business. There'll be a select type of customers that really do resonate with someone who sounds quite professional or quite corporate. It's the tone of voice you want to use to encourage trust and to encourage mutual feelings. So you go, if I talk to you and the way that you come across is making me feel a little bit uncomfortable, it's not. But if you did, then I would be like, no, I'm not really, I don't really care. Maybe you can do something that will help me, but just the way you're talking makes me feel a bit uncomfortable or distant from you, then I'm not going to engage with you. So identifying who it is that you are trying to work with, and then again, finding the tone, finding the aspects of your personality that is going to resonate with them. Throw the corporate stuff out the window. You don't know if that works yet. Maybe it does, but until you know who it is that you're trying to talk to, you know, if I'm trying to convince a 5-year-old that it's not chocolate time, it's bedtime, then I'm going to go in with the language that works for them. If I'm trying to convince, you know, my partner that it's, you know, not golfing time, it's shopping time, then I'm going to use the language that works for them. So find the language. We do this all the time in life. So hiding behind, you know, professional corporate language just because you think that that's like English neutral for everyone is not going to help you resonate with the people that you're looking to connect with. You don't know how they want to be spoken to. Find out. Then speak like that, because that's the whole point of speaking at all.
So instead of being frozen in fear of getting it wrong, just start putting stuff out there and see what lands and see what doesn't. And then as you gain confidence, like your brand voice, your brand style, your brand in total, it will evolve, right? As you kind of step into this new shoes of being a business owner and a virtual assistant, like you don't have to get it right immediately. No, who gets it? Does anyone get it right immediately?
Not often. Not often. It doesn't happen very often. There's the odd case, but no. But no, yeah, go in with the plan. Go in with, I know who I'm trying to talk to, even if I don't know how they want to be spoken to yet. I know who I want to talk to. And then go in with, this is what I think I want to be able to say and how I want to say it. That's it. No assumptions yet. Just go in with those two things. And then find out how people feel about it. So sometimes when people get a bit haphazard, some things will hit and some things won't, and they won't know why, which is why I say go in with a plan. So go in with an intention. Who am I going after? How do I think I want to say it? And then listen. And when you're listening, sometimes you're listening to the silence. It's not just listening to what people say. Sometimes it's listening to what people don't say. And I'm far more interested in the silence of things, because there's a lot that gets spoken there, and we're Kiwis and we don't actually like to say confrontational things a lot, so that's a different problem. But yeah, go in with the plan and then listen. And when things get really good response, go, oh, okay, it was this theme, it was this tone, it was this particular way of speaking that resonated with people. Start to produce more of that. So yes, it is a testing process. It is a trialing process, but go in with a plan so that you can slowly start eliminating things and adding the right things in. Otherwise, you kind of just get this scattergun approach, which is hard to measure and hard to improve on, because people don't know why things work, even when they do.
And especially if a virtual assistant is relying on social media to be putting their messaging out there. I mean, it's so hard on social media right now. Organic reach is tough, really, really tough. Like, how long would you give something before no engagement at all might be an indicator that it is time to switch things up in terms of your brand voice?
Oh,
that's a tough question, right? Because it's going to
that's
depend
a
on a lot of
real
other
tough
things.
question.
Yeah.
Look, if I wasn't getting any engagement across any of my platforms, and when you're still working out who your target audience is, I do recommend just kind of dabbling in all of them. But if I was getting no engagement in any of them, the first thing I would do was I would find the closest person who fit my ideal customer profile, and I would pay them in coffee or in anything to sit down and talk to them about what it is that I was saying, because there's no other way to get that answer. And if it was all coming back radio silence, which is unusual and for the most part doesn't happen, but if it was all coming back, then I would assume that I had some real big blind spot on the way that I was talking and how I was trying to connect. And you can't replace those kinds of conversations. So you'd be surprised how many people are really willing to have a conversation with you and just give you some genuine feedback. It's a lot more than you suspect. And you can learn a lot from one of those conversations. So that's where I'd start. And you could just be on all the wrong platforms, or you could be using the wrong tone and saying the wrong things, but you don't know yet. So if I knew nothing, I would find a person and interview them.
Great advice. Like, we don't want everyone to now go in a panic if none of their posts are getting much engagement at the moment. However, it's something to keep in mind if, like you said, if you're not getting anything across any of your platforms and you are showing up consistently, then it's definitely a conversation to have. Yeah,
that's great advice.
Yeah.
What about, so we've talked a little bit about social media, and, one of the things that I'm seeing lately is that there are like trends that come and go in terms of like how people are showing up, what they're saying, the brand voice, the personality, like profanity in lots of videos and posts, and seeing trends of like people being really authentic and open with like what's happening behind the scenes and, mistakes that they've made and things like that. So how much of like your personal brand and your brand voice should continue no matter what the trend is, and how much of it is actually going with some of those trends, and does the personal brand and the brand voice need to evolve to keep up with those trends or be to resonate with people because the times and the world is changing?
Good question. I like to try and explain it using an impersonal brand example. So when a business starts, you might have a logo and you would use a particular color blue. And so this is the thing that starts the trust building process with people. They see this blue, they see this logo, they know it means X. And over the years, that logo can start to look a little bit antiquated, a little bit old, and a little bit ugly. So you go, okay, well, we don't want to lose the brand trust because actually that's really, really good, but we do need to update the way that it looks and so that it resonates with a new lot of people. So you keep the blue and then you update the way the logo looks. With new trends that are coming through, I tell people if it fits within the personality spectrum of what you're trying to show, if a trend can fit within that, do it, because it's just a new way of connecting with people. If it falls way outside that spectrum, don't do it, because it's like you're using pink instead of blue in your brand color, and people will see it and be like, well, that doesn't make sense. That it's a bit weird. It's a little bit uncomfortable. I don't know how to feel about them now, because people are going on a trust process with you and your personal brand as well. So keep the blue, update the logo. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. I guess it's like the importance of having your why in business, right? It makes every other decision that you make so much easier if you've always got that in mind. So I guess it's the same with being really strategic and having a really clear brand and how you want that to look and feel and sound and all the rest. And then you come back to that every time there is a new thing or a new strategy or a new trend. Like you said, come back to this. Does it fit? Is it in alignment? If not, you don't have to follow all the trends, right? If it doesn't fit.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I definitely, I want to note this specifically. I definitely wouldn't advocate for people being wildly vulnerable just to cause a conversation or to get a lot more, features or likes or whatever it is that they're looking for. If that is not a part of your entire brand style, don't do it. It will get you attention. It does work. But the vulnerability position that it puts you in is not worth it in the long run. And honestly, like, my advice is unless you have processed something to a point where you feel confident sharing it with a room full of strangers, don't put it online. Mostly because you are subjecting yourself to the opinions of other people that you can't control. And if that's going to affect you emotionally at all, that is not something that is worth putting out there just because you want to get more likes or you want to get more interest generated. That's not safe and it's not healthy. So unless you've actually built a brand around your ability to be vulnerable and you know how to do that and compartmentalize in a safe way, don't jump on that bandwagon. I see very bad things coming in the future with this particular trend. It concerns me.
Courtney, this seems to be something that you're very passionate about, which I think is great. I don't think it's talked about enough. Why? Like, have you experienced this yourself? Have you seen the not so great things that can happen when somebody does open themselves up so much?
I think what I've done is I've worked in the public space where you're selling products a person can be a product for a really long time. And I've seen the dehumanization process that is possible when we have these mass digital platforms. I know that it's possible. I know that people can stop thinking about people like complex, nuanced human beings when we've simplified them down to some little personal brand aspect. And I know that not everyone has the capacity to form a wall between those opinions and their opinions of themselves. I know what it is to struggle with my own opinion of myself, to struggle with mental health, all these things. But I just don't want people unnecessarily opening themselves up to what can be a really brutal landscape. And the bigger their brand is, the more brutal it gets. if they don't have to, if they're not enough, like, nothing is worth an assault on your mental health journey. Nothing is worth that. So it's unfortunate because it does get a lot of reactions and it does get a lot of engagement. And sometimes you get this like outpouring of love, but that doesn't mean that it's safe. So I always tell people, if you wouldn't share it with a room of strangers, then don't do it online. Get to that part in your healing journey where you could share it with a room of strangers. And then by all means, tell your story, because it probably is going to help other people. But when you tell your story and how you're vulnerable online, when you're using yourself and your face and your brand, because if someone says, I think you're a terrible person, you're not going to, it's difficult to remove you, the brand, from you, the person. It's a hard process. And so preparing people to be able to do that process is something that I'm really passionate about. But I just know how much damage can be done in such a short space of time if we're not properly prepared to have an aspect of us treated like a product.
I think, Jo, would you agree that we're seeing more and more virtual assistants? Not like a load, I'm not talking hundreds, but there's definitely been a trend in the last, I believe, 12 months or so, where there's been some virtual assistants coming into the space for the very first time who are very anti-social media. Like, they're very aware of the pitfalls of social media and how unhealthy it can be. And they don't really want to be showing up on social media at all for their business. Is it possible, do you think, in this day and age, to have an online business without showing up on social media?
Yeah. I get asked this question a lot because a lot of people don't want to have to deal with social media. And what I tell them is, if your audience, the people that you're trying to reach and speak to, are not on social media, you don't have to be there. But if they are, if they're reading their post, you better show up in the mail. If they're on the radio, then you better be on the I don't care. I'm not precious about social media. But if they're there, then you have to be there, because they're not just going to come to you. They're not just going to go, you know what, I'm going to go find the person and look them up in the phone book. Like, it's not going to happen. Right. So people don't like that response, because often more people are on social media, because many, many people are. But I'm not just like, you have to be there because you have to be there at all. But you do have to be there if that's where your people are. You have to go to them and find them and talk to them.
And maybe if you are a virtual assistant listening and you really are struggling with this decision, or an aspiring virtual assistant, like going back to Courtney, your advice about, okay, your ideal clients are there, so you do have to be showing up in some way, shape, or form. But let's be really intentional and strategic about how you are showing up and what you're sharing, because that then may sit better with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's an exercise that I take clients through, and it's a little bit weird, but I promise it works, where I say, I want you to imagine you on your absolute best day. And sometimes you have to do a couple of days and smoosh them together, but like you when you are feeling invincible. And it's not very often, but sometimes we have these days where you're like, I could conquer the world today. Imagine that you. Then I want you to name it something. Can't be like, work Courtney. I need you to give it an actual name. And whenever you're coming into a situation where you're feeling uncomfortable, or you're feeling like you're having to do something that's pushing you, I want you to imagine that person, that name. Let's call them Jessica. I want you to imagine Jessica doing that thing. And the more you can kind of visualize this person, this little avatar of you, it's the Beyonce Sasha Fierce thing. And
I was just going to say, Beyonce's got an alter ego, doesn't she? Her performance version.
Correct. Yeah. And it's not you all the time. Like, you don't have to be this person all the time, but you need to know you can access them when you need them, because we're not always feeling like we can do these kinds of things. It's going to push a lot of buttons for a lot of people to start to put themselves out there. So the more you can visualize this little alter ego and just call on them when you need them. Like, I've been doing this for years. And actually for me, I really struggled to switch out and kind of just be the mess that is me. I would just kind of be on me all the time. It's not very healthy. So for me to be able to go, you can put it down now. You don't need to be that on person now, is just as valuable on the other end of the scale. But for other people, if you're, if it's really intimidating for you to do a podcast or to do a photo shoot or to jump online and talk about yourself, it's not you. It's this little Sasha Fierce version of you that's doing it. And it's just building that little wall between you, the complex, nuanced, emotional person that you are, and who you need to be in that moment. And the more you can visualize it, the more it works.
A cool exercise.
Very cool. I don't think that's weird at all. I think that's awesome.
No. That's very awesome.
Okay, I don't think we can go past a discussion about brand voice and personal brand and being authentic and genuine without not talking about ChatGPT and AI. Like, it is everywhere. And one of the downsides we see, because there are so many amazing things about AI, especially, Joe will talk your ear off about AI, especially. Like, number one fan, Joe Jensen. I'm slowly embracing it more and more and more. But I think what it took for me to embrace it was knowing that it doesn't have to lose our brand voice and who we are by using it. I think that was my biggest fear when it first came out. What are your views on AI and brand voice and personal brands?
Oh, the tea. Okay. This was really interesting. When it first came out, I was like, what is this going to do to content and to people? And I went down a rabbit hole for several months to just try and find out actually what this is and how to use it and do more things than just like, write me a recipe for a cake or whatever people are, doing to us at the moment. And yeah, because obviously as someone who curates tone and voice and wants a lot of nuance and specificity in the way things are communicated, I was very invested in finding this out. So this is how I explain it to people who are concerned about this. And a lot of people are, is it just going to turn me into this blank little kind of robot voice? As ChatGPT doesn't know anything. We think it knows everything. But if you treat it like something that doesn't know anything yet, then that's the assumption that's going to get you the furthest. So often I feel like people treat it like this robot that you say, paint me a picture of a rose. And then you want it to paint the rose that's in your head, but it just like paints a random rose. And you're like, ugh, nah, that doesn't look like something I would paint. Instead, the way I look at it is I go, here's a blank canvas. And then I put this color on there and I put this color on there. So I select all the different colors that I want to go into this painting. And I select all the different textures that I want to go into this painting. And then I say, use these colors and these textures and paint me a rose that looks like this. And then it does all the extra work for me. So when dealing with ChatGPT, I think that there's so much potential, especially for people, VAs, people who operate their own business who are really time poor, and the amount of content that needs to get created in order for you to get breakthrough is just tremendously high. This is a game changer for people, but you can't just assume that it knows what your tone and your voice sounds like. You have to tell it. So the process, I'm sure, Joe, you'll be familiar with mega prompting or putting a whole bunch of different pieces of information into ChatGPT so it knows what you're going for is incredibly useful and very important. Otherwise, it will spit out a whole bunch of generic stuff which won't sound right or look right coming from you. So if you tell it everything that it needs to know, then it can come up with 1,000 different ways to say those things.
Yeah, the other thing I love asking it is like, okay, this is what I want to do. So ask me 10, 20 questions about what you would need to know to be able to do a really great job on this for me and like understand what I actually want. Because you don't even need to know like what to tell it. You just ask it what it needs to know, what to tell it. And then you answer all the questions. And the quality of content that comes out of it after it actually understands is just way above anything that it generically would just spit out if you asked it to create something. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yes,
the more examples you can give, the better.
Yeah, the paid tool that I use here for Sam and I to create our content is Copy AI, and in there we can actually put in examples of things that we have written to then actually teach it what our style is. And it actually describes what that brand voice is. So we've actually used that. It's a little bit hypey. It's a little bit like, a kick-ass, sidekick kind of hype girl. But yeah, we're just kind of refining it to figure out what that is. And I think that's important too, is refining and, learning more and working and teaching it more and more, right? Is that what you found as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The more information, the more nuance that you put in, there will sometimes be a limit to where, it is never going to sound exactly like you. But, when you're on social media and creating captions or whatever, sometimes you don't even sound exactly like you. Like, I found myself writing things. I'm like, yeah, that works. Also a bit weird, but okay. Like, close enough. It's in the spectrum.
We wrote the other day something about the bomb, da bomb. And I was like, we would not say that in real life, but we're going to leave it in there. But there is no way we would actually say that out loud.
Well, now you did.
It's true. And it sounded really wrong coming out of my lips.
I love that you've mentioned the word spectrum a couple of times, Courtney, and this is really resonating with me, and I'm sure anyone listening too. If you've picked up on Courtney saying spectrum, like your personality has a spectrum. And I love that you can does this fit somewhere in the spectrum? Okay, great. That still is my brand voice. It still is my brand personality. It's just like part of it, a different part of it, the quirky part of it, the funny part of it, or whatever.
Yeah, people are really nuanced and complicated. Like they're not one thing, or like me on a night out is very different to me on this podcast, and that's okay.
Oh, can we have Courtney on a night out just for 5 minutes? That'd be amazing.
I need a shot of something.
What say we do this all over again tonight with some wines?
I would be keen.
And I love that it's important to remember that you are a complex creature and your personality is not just one thing. So yeah, I think that is one of my key takeaways from the conversation is absolutely there's a spectrum, which is, I think helpful too, because you don't have to always be in that narrow box all the time.
Absolutely not.
Courtney, what if you've never thought about this? What if you've been in a corporate 9 to 5, talking and acting and writing like other people's brands for 20 years, and all of a sudden you have to think about who you are? Like, who are you? How do I want to show up? And I know this isn't going to be a quick fix. And someone who's really struggling obviously needs to reach out to you, Courtney, and have a session. But are there any kind of prompts that you could ask yourself if you just don't know, if you're a bit lost? Maybe you've been at home with your young kids for 5 years and now they're at school and you're going from, I've just been known as mum for half a decade and now I want to be known as something else, but I don't know who that something else is.
Pause for existential crisis. Yeah. So one of the exercises that I do when I'm working on personal brands with clients is we have 3 circles. So 3 kind of crossing circles. And in one circle, it's called professional. The other opposite circle is called personal. And the middle circle is called evolution. So one of the things that I get people to do is to write down aspects of their personality that they want to exhibit in the personal space. So maybe it's, intelligence or curiosity or, empathy, anything that they know to be true about themselves that they want represented in their professional space. So just write them down. Most people know how they want to represent themselves in the professional space. And then on the personal bubble, I go, write down aspects of your personality that don't need to be there. So, sometimes I'm like really harsh and critical. And that's just a part of my personality that I've had since a child, but I don't bring it into my professional space because it's not helpful. Sometimes, I have massive what is life and what is the world moments, but I don't bring that into my personal brand because it's not helpful to anyone. And, sometimes I'm a little bit weird and random and a bit of a nerd, and that's fine as well. And I love that about me, but it's not on my professional brand because it's not helpful. So put aspects of your personality or key subjects sometimes. If you're I don't want to talk about my kids or there's a particular part of my journey that I'm not going to bring in there, list those 2 in the personal bubble. And then because we're people and we change and we're always kind of having new things waiting in the wings, the evolutionary bubble that sits in the middle are aspects of your personality that you feel like you might want to integrate into your professional brand, but you're not quite sure how yet. So it's like a waiting room for things where you go, yeah, you know what, I might want to integrate some more vulnerable subjects, or I might want to start talking about this particular, but I don't really know how yet, but it's just going to sit over there and it might migrate. That's where I'd start with people. It's like everyone knows what the aspects of their personality are to an extent, or if not, it's worth thinking about. So fill out that bubble, and then at least you'll know where to start and you'll know what to keep out. Yes, that's a process that I go through with people. So maybe start there.
It's great. It's a great little exercise. Yeah. Another issue, quite a common one that we see virtual assistants have in terms of the messaging and what they're putting out there, their story, their com, is when those virtual assistants that are moving from being on their own, being a freelancer, they've had a really strong personal brand, and then they've kind of found themselves and they've got a team around them. And it's like...
Found themselves.
Okay, some of them find themselves with a team. Hello. And then others are very purposeful in growing their team. Okay, so there's two options. Either way, they've got a team now and they're questioning how they should be showing up, what their brand, does their brand voice need to evolve as their team has grown? What would your advice be around that? Because it's more than just swapping the I's to we's, the me's to ours.
Absolutely. This is one of the first conversations that I have with people when we're discussing their personal brand or their impersonal brand. I say, what is your 5-year plan for the business? Do you want to build a team of people in? Do you want to be able to prepare it to sell eventually? Do you want to evolve it into something very different? What's the flexibility or what's the end goal that you're trying to work towards? Knowing that dictates how you treat that personal brand. Because the good thing about personal brands is that they evolve with you. You can go from like a virtual assistant to selling sneakers and you can keep the same brand. That would sound absurd if we took that with another business to be like, well, you can't be doing a virtual assistant work and then selling us, helicopter flying lessons. That doesn't happen. So there's a lot of flexibility to it. It can evolve as you do, and that makes sense to us because humans do that. But you can't sell it. And it's difficult to build a team into it because we've built all that trust up with this one individual. We're expecting them to show up all the time. So knowing where you want to go with everything is really important. Doesn't mean you can't use a personal brand to leverage at the beginning of your business when it is just you. Personal brands tend to grow faster because we generate connections with individuals much faster than we generate connections with, a logo and a set of values and a set of communication systems, which is what an impersonal brand is. So you can leverage your personal brand to build it, but then you need to know what you want to do in at least 5. I hate saying 10 because no one knows what's going to happen in 10 years. At least 5 years ago.
I have a 10-year plan and everyone's like, what do you mean 10 years?
What happened to a 10-year plan over COVID?
Yeah, that took put a handbrake on it for a couple of years. Yeah.
You're a brave woman, Jo. So you can leverage a personal brand to grow. But if you know that you want to build in a team or you want to build a sellable asset out of your business in the next 5 to 10 years, then you need to keep that in mind to go, okay, at some point I need to begin a splitting process. It's like going through a rebrand. In order to do it gracefully, you want about 12 months. So you don't want to kind of rush things in there. So if you want to retain the trust, but remove the personality, you need to think of it as like slowly untangling two things and building the trust into something else. So if all the trust sits with you at the moment, you can build trust into other things, but you need to know when and you need to know why you're doing it. And you need to take it through and imagine in your head that it's like a rebranding process. So yeah, knowing what to do if you found yourself in a situation where you have a team, but all of the brand trust lies with you, just go, okay, I know what I want out of this business ultimately. Now let me take people on the journey with me of what's going to happen to the business as it grows and changes and develops.
Yeah. So it's a 12-month process, not just like right, I'm going to stop showing up now and now my logo's there everywhere. And
Absolutely.
I'm no longer there.
Absolutely.
that would be a shock.
The trust lives with
Yeah.
you. Well, you can't just rebrand a business like that. Either. Some people do. It doesn't work well. You lose all the trust. So you need to take people on the journey with you. That's what a good rebranding process is going, hey, we're starting to think about this, and these are some of the new things. You need to give people a chance to get comfortable with these things so that you retain their trust, but just change the avenue that it's been aligned to. It's not a short process.
And what about the actual voice, the actual personality in terms of the writing, the style of writing, the comms? Can that still be the same voice
It can be similar.
for the company? Or how does that work?
Well, if you have a personal brand, then you have your own style of talking, and you have we know what it is. People are hearing it and reading it and seeing it all the time. Other people might struggle to replicate that if you don't give them a template on how to do it similarly. So within personal brands, they also have to follow a tone and a style and a personality. Like there's always a personality in a brand. It might be yours or it might be something that we constructed, but there's always one. So what I would do is I would create a brand voice template, which is a really simple, I can give you the template. It's a really, really simple piece of work, but it helps you outline the key areas of your brand. And it helps you go, okay, when I say warm and friendly, this is what I mean. This is what I don't mean. And this is how I like to see it done. And so outlining some key aspects of the way the voice comes across and then getting real obvious with how you do it so that you can hand that particular template to anyone and go, hey, this is it. And then they can reimagine it in their social media or their EDMs or their videos or whatever. That's how you retain consistency of voice when we're having lots of people that are having to replicate it.
Great. Oh, thank you so much. We'll drop it down in the description. Great.
Oh, I've loved this chat. Have you got any more questions, Jo? I am not even looking at our list. The conversation has just evolved so much.
Yeah, no, I think that you, Courtney, have given those listening the ability to be the version of their personality that they want to show up as online and not have to show their entire personality, and that's still being authentic.
Thank you. I hope so. I really just want everyone to feel empowered to do that. I think that will create healthier spaces for them, more successful spaces, and also more content and, more amazing things, people feeling empowered to actually be able to put things out into the world.
Yeah, because I think that holds people back, don't they? Like, oh, I'm scared of getting it wrong. Like Sam said earlier, I'm scared of getting it wrong. So I'm just frozen with, I can't put anything out because I'm so nervous. But I think what you've done, Courtney, is empowered those who are feeling that way to test and try and use part of your spectrum of your personality that you want to and see how it goes. Get that feedback.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, Courtney. And if anyone's listening that is having issues, they haven't been strategic with their brand, they've got an accidental brand voice, if you're moving in from freelancer to agency owner and you kind of want some help in terms of that 12-month strategy planning, so it's not all of a sudden overnight going from the I's to E's, connect with Courtney. We'll put Courtney's links below. But you run personal branding workshops and one-on-ones consultations, anything like that, right?
I do all the things.
Nice. Courtney, is there anything that you think we haven't covered in this session and you think I really want the virtual assistant who is struggling with this to know this because we haven't talked about it yet? Is there anything that we've left out?
I would really like all virtual assistants, all people who are considering putting their face into their professional space, to know that every single client that I have ever worked with has experienced insecurities about this, has experienced, either a fear of what people have to say or their own inner voice telling them that they're not worthy or they shouldn't. Everybody feels that. Don't let that stop you, because if you could see what I can see, which is everyone of all shapes and sizes and styles and demeanors struggling with exactly the same thing, then you would feel less alone, and you would also be able to push through that and just acknowledge that that's just part of being human. So yeah, I would want them to know that everybody feels like that.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Sam and Joe VA Show. If you'd like to find out more, head to the VA Foundry website to check out the mastermind and the amazing resources, courses, and coaching.
You can find us at thevafoundry.com.